Breaking Glass.
Now, here's a story I'd like to pitch for a film project. This is a story. Perky 21-year-old, international school-educated, princess-dreaming party girl, fashionista from a wealthy family, studies in an exclusive business college in the US, realizes she does not want riches after all, decides while at school to become mayor of a small town in Palawan. This is, of course, the true-to-life story of our guest, Pai Alvarez, the mayor of San Vicente. Now, normally, this program does not feature politicians because God knows the Philippines does not need more politicians being interviewed. But check this out and you'll see why we just had to get her on.
Being mayor is just like solving a Rubik's Cube. You have all the problems in front of you, and you might think that it's impossible. But in the end, you always get to solve it, and there's always a way. Correct? Who wants to solve the Rubik's Cube? I only have 1 minute left. Oh my God. I also teach classes. And I play basketball with the locals. And I'm really good at three-pointers. They don't always like me because I'm a very out-of-the-box politician. I don't even call myself a politician. I'm a public servant. So there are some people in San Vicente that believe in Kulam, which is all part of the fun. Why is it fun to be a mayor? Because they call me up all the time. Mayor, magpakasal kayo. Mayor, kailangan ng lechon. Mayor, they need this. Mayor, may problema. Mayor, nag-away. Mayor, ninakaw niya yung manok ko.
Pai, thanks for coming.
Well, thank you for having me here, Jay.
You know, the question is why? Why become mayor of a small town in Palawan?
Well, that's a great question. Actually, get that a lot. But, I throw the question back to why not? The Philippines is my home. The Filipino people, are my fellow countrymen, and there's so many of them that need help, that need the support, that need the assistance. And I think it's about time that younger people are involved in politics, and I think it's the right time that people from my generation take a stand and be in more positions that lead.
There's a story you tell about you telling your family of your intentions, and then your father says, okay, you want to run for vice mayor, and you say,
No, Dad, I want to run for mayor.
now, your mom was a different story, right?
Yes.
Why didn't she want you to run?
Well, actually, no one else in my family wanted me to run. My mom and my siblings were all against it.
Why?
I think it's because in the Philippines, we're very used to having this mindset about politics and the government and it being very negative. And so, being the youngest in my family, I don't think any of my family members would see it as a good thing that I would be entering basically a pit of danger. And that's basically it.
You hit a point there. We are quite cynical of politicians. I, for example, have a hard time trusting anybody over 40 years old in government.
That's why they should be less than,
less than 40 years old.
They should be under 40.
Exactly.
So maybe you'll trust them more.
Exactly. But do you think my cynicism is misplaced?
I feel the same way. The reason I'm doing what I'm doing now is because I want to correct the system. I want to help improve the system. I've been very negative about the Philippine government throughout.
It's a sport.
Definitely. Even when I was in college, I had discussions with my Filipino friends in the States, and they didn't want to go back to the Philippines because they were so sick and tired of the local government and how it wasn't really being efficient or progressing the country forward. And so I had the same mentality, but I wanted to do something about it, and I didn't want to just complain and look the other way. I was going to complain, but do something.
No, I'll be honest. Okay, I'm even quite cynical about you. I'm sorry, I know.
Sure.
While researching on you, you come off as somebody naive, quirky, daddy's little girl. You're open about it. You shop Gaultier in Singapore. You salon at Emphasis at the Manila Peninsula. And your favorite cheesecake is in a department store in Tokyo.
Yes.
I'm thinking, is she just playing princess, a rich girl's dream come true? Can you really connect with your constituents? I think does she understand what the people need, or are you just going to supply everybody with Prada?
Right. Well, that would not be economically feasible to supply everyone with Prada, although it would be nice. No, well, where do I begin? First off, it has to do with my upbringing, with my family. Although I was very blessed and privileged my entire life, I was never taught, or I was never, given by my parents anything with a silver spoon. I've always had to work for it, regardless of what it was, whether it was a piece of candy or a nice birthday present, during my birthday, I always had to work for it. And so that mentality and that system where I always had to, strive hard to accomplish my goals and reach my dreams was something very early on I've had inside and at my core.
Can you connect though with your people?
Yeah, a lot of people will think, because of where I come from or my family or also where I stand, they say, oh, she's just, this person. And I think we shouldn't stereotype people in the first place. I think if we keep stereotyping people at a certain, level, then how do you look past that? And when you ask me about if I get to understand the locals in San Vicente, I think it's really my job to understand them, and I think that's why I won, was because during the elections, instead of me campaigning and saying, being a preacher and saying, I will, do this, I will do this, vote for me because I'm this. I stopped doing that, and I didn't even start, and I just listened to them, and I said, ano ba yung kailangan nyo? Ano ba yung mga problema ninyo? And how can we find a solution? And by doing that, I was able to discover all these problems in different villages. In one barangay, they didn't have access to clean water. In another barangay, the rice resources were scarce. And so these are problems, and these are support systems that are needed to be provided by the government, which weren't. And these are very simple. And all I had to do was take the microphone from me and give it to them.
And listen to them.
Yeah.
Right. A great divide exists in this country between the have a lot and the have very little. It's a divide that does not just physically exist, but more importantly is in here. We don't really care for the poor, because think about it, if we did, we wouldn't be in the situation we'd be in now. Yet you seem to have transcended that divide.
I'm a fan of this, the rich versus poor, or the poor versus rich, and saying the big difference between the two. Most often people will say the poor are poor. They won't even consider them as people. But I look at them as people who need opportunities that just didn't get it like we did. And so there has to be that understanding and that sensitivity towards people who are poverty-stricken, because they're hungry, homeless, jobless. And at the end of the day, they live an every man for themselves kind of mentality and lifestyle. And we don't have that. We have a roof over our heads. We have food on the table. We can put our children to school. But they live every single day hoping to feed their family, hoping to be warm and dry at night, and hoping to have, enough sustenance for the future. And so it's a completely different mindset. And for me, yes, I belong in one segment, but it doesn't mean that I can't help those that need, the assistance. And with these residents in San Vicente, 30,000 of them, 80% live below poverty. It's really my job to be able to bridge that gap and give them the opportunities that they would otherwise not get.
Let's talk about that later, but first, let's do some, show us some pictures.
Sure.
I want them to see what San Vicente is like. This one here, you were officiating
a wedding.
A wedding.
Yes.
That's right.
I had to do my first wedding when I was 21 years old. My first 2 weeks in office. And they basically said, Mayor, may gusto magpakasal, kailangan niyo pong mag-officiate. So, I've never had any experience prior to that, a wedding, officiating a wedding. And so they basically gave me a to-do list, 1 to 10, saying, first you state the name, and then you look at the sponsors and the family members and the parents. And then at the very end, it says, give marriage counseling. And, I was only 21 years old, so I'm like, anong ika-counsel ko dyan? I'm being honest. That's the one thing about me is I'm always honest, and if I have a question, I will ask. And so I looked at my department head, and I'm like, what marriage counseling will a 21-year-old give to a couple that's getting married? I can say, okay, you know, love each other, but really, you know, and so that's part of the job. It's part of the job. And I've done 18 weddings since.
Oh, wow. I think that's you with your
Campaigning.
Campaigning,
Yes, my hair was still short then.
Okay. And you just had the
Our Mud Festival.
Mud Festival recently,
yes,
right?
the Malagnang
Am I
Mud Festival. We just had it.
Ah, beautiful.
It looks like Jurassic Park.
You're right. Wow. Ah.
The kids, there's so many kids. So many kids who want to have candy and afternoon snacks.
The morning exercise,
Yes,
right? The
every
government-
flag ceremony, flag retreat, we have our employees do a dancercise to Lady Gaga or any other pop song that's current. One thing I learned in San Vicente is everybody loves to dance till 5 in the morning. They beat anybody in the local clubs here. And the employees have been sitting on their chairs for the longest time. So I said, you know what, in order to get your minds working and to be able to have positive inputs into the office, you need to at least have the blood pumping and the energy good in your system.
So you instituted this
We
whole
do the dance
and-
aerobics twice a week. Actually, want to do it every day for 5 days. But then the employees were complaining that they were sweating so much right after, and they didn't want to change because they only had a few sets of uniforms. So, you know, twice a week.
Perhaps a holdover from our feudal past. You know, a mayor here really isn't somebody who just governs, but is the community's patriarch or matriarch,
Yes.
and also is the rural bank or the doctor.
Everything.
Yeah.
You know, when they say, okay, they give job descriptions, they should say for local Philippine mayors, for, you know, each town, it really entails your whole life. You have no private life. You know, you have to be a disposable ATM. You have to have several helping hands. You have to have insane patience, and it's really not an easy job.
And you even tell a story about your police chief, who happens to be a lady,
Yes.
crying to you
Yes.
with issues.
Yes,
That's-
I mean, at the end of the day, even though I'm 24 years old, I'm seen as the mother. They always call me siya ang ina ng San Vicente, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm already a mom, you know. And they look to me for everything, you know, whether somebody gets bit by a crocodile at 5 in the morning, or there's domestic disputes, or somebody stole someone's chicken from the neighboring house. Or to my chief of police, who is, you know, a woman, and yeah, she cried to me a few times when she had personal problems, and I just had to sit there. I mean, like, I'm in my office, and she comes in with like a really, you know, disturbed look on her face, and just started to vent, and I was just there, okay, water, you know. It's like, it's not gonna be okay, it's gonna be all right, and I'm really learning to adapt more with this job, with people's attitudes and feelings, because it's so crucial.
It's all about
Everyone
feelings.
is so sensitive and emotional.
And you've also introduced Halloween in your town. Am I correct?
Yes. I'm a big fan of all these, I guess, Western celebrations, such as Halloween. But, you know, when I was growing up in the Philippines, in Manila, as a kid, we would always, you know, have trick-or-treats in the village, and it was fun to dress up in costume, and, you know, you would dress up in somebody who you wanted to be, like a doctor or a policewoman or someone scary. So I thought about bringing it to San Vicente because my town has never experienced Halloween. So I even went to Divisoria to buy 1,000 jack-o'-lantern, you know, candy dispensers. And when I brought it to my munisipyo, my staff were like, Mayor, ano bang tong tabong to? You know, and so for me, that's just something that they're missing out on for the fun of life, you know. Just so I held a ball, the scary night in San Vicente, come in your most scariest costumes. We even had like a horror tunnel where I made the engineering department build, you know, fake coffins, and they didn't want to do it because they're so superstitious, and they didn't want to rent the coffin either and be lying on it. So I said, okay, who wants to volunteer to pretend to be dead? Like, Mayor, hindi pwede. Like, you know, they're so traditional in that sense. So actually, all my volunteers were all from high school. It was all the kids who wanted to do it, and they loved it. They loved it. They were doing backflips like Emily Rose in the horror tunnel. I mean, it was really scary. And what was the most important, actually the funnest part, was when they dressed in costume. There was so much, I guess, there were so many people who were unsure of what they wanted to do. If they were like, should I do this or should I do it? There was so much hesitation. And when the event day came itself, I was so shocked because everyone's costume, maybe like 2,000 people attended, everyone's costume was the scariest you could ever be. Like here you'd see Tinkerbell, you'd see like, Superman there. It's Superman but dead.
Yes,
It's Tinkerbell with blood.
That's funny because I've seen that in other provinces also. That when it's
Yeah.
Halloween, we seem to have this morbid.
It's insane. Like they're an angel but zombie.
Yeah, like
So it's
that's
complete,
true,
but
that's
it's fun.
You concentrated on environment technology in college. You seem to have a special place for it in your heart. And
Yes.
in fact, you've been very protective of wildlife in your area. You're also promoting volunteerism. Please tell us more about that and what else you've been doing in your community.
Because Palawan is, one of the last frontiers of the Philippines, and it's truly one of the most lush provinces I've seen, especially San Vicente. It's insanely covered with, super lush forests. And so environment just comes at hand. I mean, for me, it's important because we rely on our natural resources and our ecological biodiversity to survive. I'm not trying to be an environmentalist, but it doesn't take very much to understand how important it is to prioritize protecting and preserving the environment. And a lot of areas in the Philippines, we actually abuse that. And in San Vicente, I want to be able to protect it.
And in fact, you want to bring in tourism, but you want to do it smartly.
Yes.
Am I correct?
So,
You don't
yes.
want to turn into another Boracay. You
No,
are doing
no.
it with a master plan. Am I correct?
Yes. Well, the idea is to develop San Vicente into a tourism destination, but the sustainable way. Because we've already witnessed so many times how tourism development impacts local communities. And we've seen it in Boracay, we've seen it in Bali, we've seen it in Thailand. And what I want to do is take the best practices and translate that into my town. So one of them is urban master planning. Reason being is if I'm no longer mayor, the town needs to be protected. So the grid system has to be in place, the electrical system should be there, the water system, even ways for floods. The map of that to show so that just in case disaster strikes, the locals know where to go and know where not to go. I mean, it's a whole concept of master planning that I'm actually working with Palafox right now. The daughter, Carmi, she's very good. She's also young and energetic, and she's very open-minded with, basically urban planning for a rural town.
You've brought in a no-nonsense CEO type of leadership there, right? Because you took up international business administration. In fact, you face resistance with this approach.
Yes, all the time. I mean, I come in from, again, being educated in the Western world and having that kind of experience working in a Western world setting of work. I worked for Chanel for 2 years. And so there, everything is important. Being on time, answering your emails, just having everything documented. Everything is fair. There's no gender inequality. Like all these things that you would see in the States. And so when I started working in San Vicente, when I became mayor, meetings with my barangay captains, they would say, come at 8 o'clock because the meeting is at 8, an official meeting. And everybody would come in at 10, sometimes even later than 10, and not everybody would be on time. And I'm like, I don't want to waste anyone's time, nor should you waste mine. So if we say call for a meeting at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock, you be there 10 minutes before. If not, I lock the door. And then I locked the door that time and they all called me Mayor Terror. So now they're all on time.
Speaking of Mayor Terror, you've also banned cockfighting. I don't know if you're aware, but it's a very dangerous thing you've just done. It's usually powerful people behind these things. But worst of all, I think I'm more concerned about, hundreds of inebriated men on a Sunday with nothing to do. What happened? Why are you involved in the way they live?
I didn't exactly ban it completely. I'm just not for cockfighting. Because when I travel on the roads on a Sunday, and I say, where's everyone? All the men are in the ring, and I'm saying, why are, and they're all drunk. And although it's a traditional, game or a traditional pastime that the Filipinos are very used to, in a town where most of your residents are poor and struggling, I don't see what's the point or why the significance or the importance to be, dealing with cockfighting or activities that don't make them become productive the next day. And so it's not something I encourage. Cockfighting is not something I'm saying, okay, Mayor Pai's cockfighting sponsor this weekend. No,
Okay.
You'll never get that. I mean, I prioritize projects that have a long-term impact versus short-term gains.
You've said, I care too much about everything. You've also said, in public service, I have learned that it's very important to be compassionate, but also to be wise about my actions and decisions. That's what you've learned after 2 years in office. Meanwhile, what have you learned about the Philippines?
Well, I've learned so many things with working for government for 2 years and being in public service. One thing truly I've learned about the Filipinos is they're very sensitive. Me being a leader in a very high position, I have to be careful with what I do, because if I, allocate certain supports or funds for a project and then I don't include others, people become very skeptical, or they get very negative about it and say, "Ay, si Mayor hindi kami sinama." And as a
Nagtatampo,
yeah, the tampo factor.
That's one factor you have to watch out
And
for.
that's very difficult because I want to help everyone. And in economics, nothing in life is free. So it's not like you can. It's very difficult to be able to help everyone at one given time. But I try very hard to help them. Another thing that I learned about the Filipinos is they're very hardworking. In my town, where there's so many poor families, all the mothers and the women who are there that are unemployed actually go to me and say, "Mayor, gusto po namin ng trabaho." And that for me shows a lot about their character. Shows a lot about how Filipinos are going to work as long as the jobs are there. I don't think we're a tamad culture at all. I think it's just kulang talaga sa opportunity. There's just a lack of jobs and the industry to support it that we really need to focus on. And that's one thing I learned about the Filipinos is you give them, something like that, like a job, they'll really work. And for me, that says a lot about our future. That says a lot about promise, and it's a really good thing.
I'm assuming, of course, you've stayed corruption-free. But is it really possible to stay true to your ideals? Have you had to make compromises? In order to do this, I will have to do this.
For me, no. I think that the new kind of government has to be more transparent, and they have to be more affirmative when it comes to, when you have moments when corruption can take place. It's very easy, for you to do a project and to allocate a certain percentage to let's say, a buffer, and that buffer would probably go to the pockets of several people. But I don't know why you'd have to do it. You're not in this job to steal. You're in this job to serve. So when people say, the government is so corrupt, it's a choice. And it's a choice by these leaders. So again, it goes back to the, drawing board. You must pick or vote for the good leaders who won't choose to be corrupt. I don't steal because I know it's not right. I don't steal because it's not what my job is. And I don't steal because you shouldn't. It's a normal human, I think, know-how that you shouldn't take something from your neighbor.
How have you handled people who have tried to get you to be corrupt?
It's not like it's just, a handout over the table. It's definitely more subtle than that. And it's very ingrained in the system. It's like, I've heard of stories from other officials who are also young, actually a congresswoman, who looked at a project and said, okay, there's this buffer for this amount. And she said, why? And then the whole office that backed up said, oh, because it's always been that way. And so for some people who are having a hard time, I guess, trying to confront corruption, it's because it's really in the system. And it's, for me...
But you can go against the system.
That's what I'm doing. If somebody comes up to me, hey, we want to do mining in San Vicente, and of course I'm going to say no. And then they say, okay, well, what about mining now? And then slip me, whatever, like a check or something. That's not going to happen. Again, that's not my job, and my responsibility is to protect the town. And to protect the town, that means I don't steal and be corrupt, and that's what I'm going to do.
I have two quotes here. One is by Henry Kissinger, who said that power is the ultimate aphrodisiac. And another one is, the problem with the system is power turns to greed. What do you think a person must be to be on the straight and narrow in this country?
Well, it's a great question and a great issue with power. When power is given to you, you don't get it. It's given to you by the people. You have to be responsible with power, because power can go good or bad. Being a leader requires so much more sensitivity and, I guess, endurance when it comes to something so great such as power. Having that ability to command, to lead, to execute, on a very big level, it's huge and really gets in your head. So
you can understand that it can change a person.
It really gets in your head. Like sometimes maybe when I'm by myself, I have certain reflections where I'm like, oh my God, I could be doing all of this. You know, I could be power tripping. But at the end of the day, it comes to who you are at your core, who you really are as a person. And if you're a good person and you're God-fearing, I don't think it should be a problem.
So you constantly ask yourself questions.
All the time. All the time. I mean, with this job, I think every waking minute I have, am I doing this right? Is this, how it's supposed to be? Will they get mad at me? Will they love it? All these things. And the problem with these, my mind never shuts down. Like, even when I'm sleeping, I'm like half awake. And so...
Hey, I wonder, who do you talk to when you have all these questions and no answers?
Myself. I mean, I live in San Vicente. It's not exactly the most urban location, as you can see, very Jurassic Park. And so I've had a lot of time to reflect by myself. And just, when I do projects, it's really me at the core and at the forefront. So I'm very involved.
And your father was involved heavily decades ago in logging in Palawan. It's been said, some illegally, in fact, he had an unsuccessful bid for governor. He's still heavily involved in politics there. Doesn't he represent the old guard, the old ways that you're railing against? That must make for interesting dinners.
Yeah. Well, that's very true. My dad was a logger in San Vicente. Actually, his concession was there. And the reason I actually chose to run in San Vicente was because we have employed so many families when he was still logging there. So the connection and the relationship with these residents was very strong already ever since before. So that was really why I felt like I needed to do something about it, to help the families na napag-iwanan. The reason why his logging concession was put to a stop was so that the strategic environmental plan in Palawan would be implemented, because that plan to protect Palawan would not have been implemented unless all loggers were stopped their concessions. So my dad was one of them, actually. And a big misconception we have with logging is that it's bad. I mean, if I look around, the world today, so many of our products and goods are made out of wood. And it would be wrong for me to say that we don't need the lumber. We don't need, the wood, timber, sorry. And it's, I don't believe in completely exploiting our natural resources. My dad was a sustainable logger. And I'm telling you this because if you visit San Vicente now and, we take you on an aerial tour, among the 23 municipalities in the entire Palawan, San Vicente is the most lush area you will see, full of trees. The only bald spots right now, and very few, are kaingin. And that's when the locals slash and burn parts of the forest to plant because they don't know any better. And so, there are loggers that give the negative, message or impact about logging. And there's very few who actually do it right. My dad, would only log out of a hectare less than 10 trees. And then he wouldn't log anymore. And then he would go on to another sector, another part of the forest. And so I think it's important for us to understand also that not everything that we think is bad is truly bad. Because, again, you said a while ago, government is corrupt. It's very negative. But then look at me, and I'm not yet corrupt, and hopefully won't be.
You'll say, you know, we've been crushed a million times before. Maybe it's our fault. Maybe we put too much emphasis on leaders, right? And you're open about saying that the old politicians should step aside and let the new ones in, right? My generation, we've heard that story before, but every time we get our hearts broken.
Right.
Hopefully, you won't break our hearts.
Well, hopefully, I have more energy now, and I started earlier. At 21 years old in public service, that's fairly early on. I encourage more people to actually be involved in public service under their 30s, because we need more young blood in the system. We do. Although the older generation are there, and they have the wisdom and the experience and probably the know-how, they're also less optimistic and they're less naive and gullible, which I think is something we have going for us. Because then I still believe that it will happen. I'm not going to say, it's just how it is, or I'm not going to leave it at that. No, I know it's going to change, and it's going to be for the better. And I'm going to be here all the way to make sure that it happens.
Bye. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much, Jay, for having me at Rappler. It's really fun, and I wish I can come back.
Thank you.